Hi, I'm Chris Teutsch, Forage Extension Specialist at the University of Kentucky, and I'm going to be talking about hay storage and feeding, reflections of a forage agronomist. I'd like to thank the Virginia Forage and Grassland Council for inviting me back to Virginia to spend a week with you all talking about hay as part of profitable cow-calf operations. This is the fifth part of this presentation, and we're going to be focusing on hay feeding considerations. The first thing I want to say is that hay quality matters, and as hay quality increases, refusal decreases, and that means we're going to need less hay and also less supplement as hay quality increases. So animals are going to tend to waste less hay if it's higher in forage quality and if we don't have a lot of weathering damage around the outside of that bale. Remember to always test hay and then match that hay to the animal's requirements at a given stage of production. And we can use that data to determine if we're going to need supplementation or not. And again, we have the UK beef cow forage supplement tool, which is a really handy tool for telling you whether that hay is going to meet the nutritional requirements of a beef cow in 3 stages of the production cycle. The number one factor impacting forage quality is going to be stage of maturity at harvest. It's the single most important factor impacting forage quality. So if you can do one thing in your operation to improve forage quality, it's going to be getting your hay cut in a timely manner in the spring. All right, let's talk a little bit about using hay rings to limit waste. And there's a whole bunch of different hay rings out there, and the price on these hay rings varies greatly, from reasonable to pretty darn expensive for a cow-calf system. The idea when we're using a hay ring is to put something between that animal and the hay, and that's going to help reduce hay loss. This middle picture was actually from one of our bale grazing studies, and this hay bale, actually, we got pretty good utilization out of it. Not a lot of hay wastage in this system. In our bale grazing study, the hay waste was around 12%. Some of these cone feeders and some of these specialized hay rings do a little bit better job than just a ring feeder like we used in this study with the shielded bottom. But almost always they're going to be better than just putting a bunch of hay out and allowing animals to access to it. Okay, let's talk about best management practices for hay feeding. 1, choose a well-drained area. We want to match hay to the animal class and its nutritional needs. We want to feed stored hay that's outside first and save barn hay for later feeding. We want to use hay rings or a feeding wagon, something to put a barrier between the animal and the hay, and that's going to help improve utilization and decrease losses. We want to only allow access to enough hay for 2 to 3 days. So if you're in the habit of putting out enough hay for a week or 2 at a time, that's not ideal. They're going to tend to waste more hay if you do that. So rationing that hay out is just like stockpile grass. If we ration it out, we're going to get a better utilization of that hay. And it's okay to make mature animals that are in pretty good condition clean up their plate. Now, it gets a little dicey with animals that are still growing and learning how to eat hay. If we push them too hard to clean up, we could be sacrificing some animal performance and growth. But a mature cow, it's all right to make her clean her plate. And then we want to move hay feeding points around, right, to get a better distribution of nutrients within the grazing system. So this is just an example of a traditional versus a tapered hay ring. And we had a 20% reduction in feeding losses when we used the tapered hay ring. This is unrolling and hay processing. So this is the percent loss on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, we have unrolled hay, processed on the ground, and then processed in a bunk. So processed in a bunk was kind of our control, and that was the percent loss was close to 0. If we unrolled the hay, we had about, it looks in this study, about a 12% dry matter loss, feeding loss. The big feeding loss was processed on the ground. So we ground that hay up and then we fed it out on the ground, and that was closer to a 20% loss. So that's a significant increase in feeding losses when we're processing hay and feeding it on the ground. Probably not a good idea to do that. It's better if you're able to feed hay as an unrolled or feed it in a ring. This is a comparison of a cone feeder unrolling and processed hay fed on the ground. And this is increase in hay offered. So the cone feeder was kind of our control. So we set that as 0. If we unrolled it, we had to offer more hay, about 4 to 5%. If we processed the hay and fed it on the ground, we had to offer about 15 to 16% more hay. Pretty significant increase in the amount of hay that we needed to put out compared to a cone feeder if we process that hay. At the end of the day, processing hay and feeding on the ground is probably not the best idea we've ever came up with. Plus, what are we doing? We're putting a big piece of equipment in a tractor between that hay bale and the cow. What's that going to do to our profitability? That's going to increase our production cost. We're trying to pay for that piece of equipment, pay for that tractor, and then using that equipment in the tractor. All right, so here are my closing thoughts. Hay is a necessary evil in cow-calf systems, but it's expensive. And we need to really think, if we want to remain profitable, we really need to think about how we incorporate hay into our grazing system. We want to minimize the amount of hay that we feed. Hay is negatively correlated with profitability in most cases. So we really need to focus on things that we can do to extend the grazing season. We want to work to improve hay quality so that we're putting better feed in front of those animals when we do have to feed hay, so that we require less supplementation and they're going to utilize that high quality hay more efficiently. We always want to store hay under cover if possible. Not always possible, but if we can, we want to store it under cover. Hay stored under cover will last a long, long time. We'll lose some vitamins in that hay, but in general, hay stored under cover off the ground is going to last years, sometimes longer than years, sometimes decades, without a significant loss in crude protein and total digestible nutrients. The key is breaking that ground contact with the hay. If we can do one thing for hay storage outside, we want to break ground contact. If we can break that ground contact, we're going to significantly reduce our losses in storage. We want to make sure that we match our hay to our animal class, and then put something between that hay and the animal, a ring, a bale wagon, something that makes it a little bit harder for them to pull that hay out and waste more of that hay. And then move our hay feeding points around, ideally. If we move our hay feeding points around, we're going to get a much more uniform distribution of nutrients contained within that hay. We've got to look at that hay as more than just a feed source, but also a fertilizer source, and think about how we can capture the maximum value of those nutrients, that's $50 worth of nutrients contained in a ton of hay. And avoid feeding processed hay on the ground. That's just a recipe for increased dry matter losses. Just like to mention a couple of resources to you real quick. We've got the KY Forage's YouTube channel, and this is a great source. We've got over 500 videos on here of all things forage and livestock related. So if you're interested, you can go here. It's organized as individual videos and then playlists. And the playlist would be, for example, if you look here, forages at the KCA. So we had a forages session at our Kentucky Cattlemen's Association every year. And in that section, we'll have 3 or 4 presentations. And they're organized underneath a grouping called a playlist. And you can see all the videos from that particular meeting. One thing I'll just mention on searching, there's two search bars. There's one at the top of the page and one in the middle. You want to use the one in the middle to search within this KY Forage's YouTube page. Just want to mention our UK Forage's webpage. We've got probably one of the nicest Forage's websites in the United States. We've got upcoming events on here. We've got Forage News, where you actually can get a newsletter that has Forage-related articles in it every month at the beginning of the month. It will be emailed directly to you as a PDF, or you can just come to the page and click on these different sections and read it on the web. Simply Google UKY Forages to find our Forages webpage. All right, that's all I have for this presentation on hay storage and feeding. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. My contact information is below. You're always welcome to call me or email me. We always encourage you to work through your local extension agent. They're a great local resource, can answer many of your questions. And if they can't answer your questions, they know how to get in contact with the specialist that can. All right, have a great day. Thank you for your attention.